They said they were just staying for New Year's Eve. But as the clock struck 1 minute past midnight, the hidden clause in my grandmother's will triggered right in front of them. As the blizzard sealed the mountain, the court opened an emergency satellite session, and the wall safe finally released the wax-sealed envelope my mother thought she had destroyed. My name is Everly Gonzalez. I am 32 years old, and for the past 6 years, I have served as the operations director at Northline Ridge Partners. It is a job that demands precision, foresight, and the ability to manage complex, cascading systems without emotional deviation. I am, by all accounts, very good at my job. But on this day, the 31st of December, I was not in the city managing logistics. I was in the Frostvale Pine Forest, in a cabin named Gray Finch, acting as a steward. I had escaped the city 2 days after Christmas, driving the 4 hours north while the rest of the world was still lost in a fog of wrapping paper and leftover ham. The city was a smear of gray slush and exhaust. The forest was silent, white, and clean. Gray Finch Cabin was not a vacation home. It was a fortress of solitude my grandmother, not my mother, had left to me. It was the only place my systems were not about supply chains, but about survival, memory, and the strict, unbending letter of the law. The cold air felt good, sharp as glass in my lungs. Inside, the cabin smelled of old cedar, beeswax, and the faint, sweet trace of the wood smoke from the fireplace I had lit the night before. I sat at the heavy oak desk my grandmother had used, the surface worn smooth by her hands and mine. In front of me was the Winterhold file. It was not a casual collection of papers. It was a 3-inch thick, fire-resistant accordion folder, meticulously organized. My fingers, steady and cool, flipped through the tabs. Boundary maps, trust deeds, tax receipts. I pulled out the primary map, parcel 18B. I traced the surveyor's lines, the ink a bold black against the topographic white. I knew every marker, every stream, every ancient pine that denoted a corner of the property. I moved to the next tab. Finch Preserve Trust. I did not need to read the full document. I had memorized the critical passages. It was a revocable trust that, upon the meeting of specific conditions, would become irrevocable. My grandmother had been a brilliant woman, a woman who loved birds and hated ambiguity. I checked the final tab. Stewardship proof. Here were the paid tax receipts for the last 3 years, stapled to their corresponding county confirmations. Behind them, invoices from the roofer who had replaced the shingles in August, and the arborist who had cleared the dangerous limbs from the access road in October. Finally, the bird log, a detailed journal of sightings, feeder maintenance, and habitat preservation, countersigned by the county wildlife assessor just last week. Every condition had been met, every I dotted, every T crossed. I was prepared. My phone vibrated on the desk, a harsh, invasive buzz in the quiet room. I looked at the screen, a text from my cousin, Marla. My stomach tightened, not with surprise, but with the cold, dull ache of confirmation. I opened it. It was a photo, taken seconds ago. The front door of Gray Finch was wide open. In the frame, my mother, Elaine, was smiling, her arms spread wide as if presenting a game show prize. My older brother, Derek, had his hand on the doorframe, leaning in with a look of proprietary assessment. Behind them, my Aunt Paula, Elaine's sister, was waving, already holding a bottle of champagne. The caption beneath the photo read, "Here getting ready to ring in the new year at Grandma's house. You should come up." An exclamation point, as if this were a spontaneous, joyous invitation, as if they had not been planning this for months. My hand moved from the phone to my laptop. I clicked the icon for the cabin's security system. The app opened, displaying a 4-quadrant grid. Porch, living room, kitchen, loft. The feeds were live, the connection robust via the Starlink I had installed. They were inside. They were everywhere. I watched. My breath held. as they streamed in. Suitcases, plural, not overnight bags. Hard-shell suitcases that I knew contained weeks of clothing. Derek was not helping. He was already in the living room, pointing up at the loft. I could not hear the audio yet, but I could read his lips. That's where the studio goes. My mother was in the kitchen. She opened the refrigerator. She opened my cabinets. She was looking for flutes. Aunt Paula handed her the bottle of champagne, and my mother, with the practiced ease of someone who feels she is exactly where she belongs, popped the cork. The tiny, pixelated figures on my screen raised their glasses. A feeling rose in my chest, hot and sharp. It was the physical sensation of being invaded. This was not Grandma's house. Not anymore. This was my property, my responsibility. This was the house where I had spent every summer. This was the porch where my grandmother and I had sat. Her hand frail but firm on mine, pointing out the difference between a finch and a sparrow. This was the desk where she had written me letters. Letters filled with advice not about life or love, but about foundations and taxes and the importance of holding the line. I minimized the video feed for a second and opened my photo gallery. I zoomed in on a picture I had taken 2 weeks ago of the note I had laminated and affixed to the refrigerator, right next to the ice maker. It was a crisp, typed notice. Legal notice. This property is held by the Finch Preserve Trust, pursuant to the terms of the trust. Clause 4B. Upon the documented fulfillment of stewardship duties by the beneficiary, the trust converts to an irrevocable trust at 12:01 a.m., January 1st, vesting all rights and title in the sole beneficiary. All access is by permission only. They had undoubtedly seen it. They had probably laughed at it. Everly and her little rules. They thought it was a request. They did not understand it was a countdown. My fingers moved to a drawer in the desk. I pulled out a small, black, solid-state hard drive. It was unlabeled. I plugged it into the laptop's side port. The icon appeared on my desktop. I opened the security app's admin panel and initiated a full backup of all cloud footage, starting from December 24th, the day the reconnaissance texts had begun. The progress bar started to fill. My plan, codenamed Let Them Talk, was in motion. I had been recording everything for a week, their texts, their missed calls, and now, their arrival. As the data transferred, the phone buzzed again, a different alert, not a text message, but a county emergency broadcast. County Sheriff Frostvale, Level 3 blizzard warning. Met, Spencer Road and Frostvale Pass are expected to close by 8 p.m. Shelter in place. This is not a drill. The snow, which had been a gentle, picturesque flurry, was already beginning to thicken outside the window. The wind was picking up, a low moan in the pines. This changed the timeline. This accelerated everything. It meant they were trapped here, with me, and I was trapped with them. I pulled the hard drive, the transfer complete. I stood up and put on my heavy parka, pulling the hood up over my head. I opened the study door, went through the kitchen. I could see them on my phone screen, still in the living room, completely oblivious, and stepped onto the back porch. The wind hit me instantly, a physical shove. The air was thick with white. I moved to the far corner, near the woodpile. My gloved fingers fumbled for the loose stone in the foundation. I pulled it back. Behind it, set deep into the mortar, was a small, waterproof metal box, disguised as a utility junction. I opened it and placed the hard drive inside. Then I did one more thing. I took a fresh, high-capacity SD card from my pocket and walked to the front of the cabin. The wind howled, whipping my hair across my face. I reached up, my boots slipping slightly on the icy porch boards, to the underside of the rain gutter. My fingers found the small, magnetic clasp, a hidden mailbox, no bigger than a deck of cards, dropped into my hand. I slotted the SD card into it and snapped it back into place, a physical escape route. Evidence. If the power went out, if the Starlink failed, if they found my laptop, that card would remain. I went back inside, locking the deadbolt behind me, my heart a cold, steady drum. I stripped off the wet parka and hung it on the hook. The smell of the cedar log seemed stronger now, a scent of resilience, of permanence. If they call this everyone's house, I whispered to the empty study, I will show them, in exacting detail, what the paperwork says. I sat back down at the desk. I pulled my laptop closer. I opened the admin panel for the security system one last time. I clicked the master control. Enable audio recording, all feeds. A tiny red dot appeared in the corner of all 4 video quadrants. The microphone in the main smoke detector was sensitive enough to pick up a whisper. The one in the doorbell camera would capture every word spoken on the porch. I leaned back in my chair, the old wood solid at my back. I watched my family on the screen. My mother was gesturing, dividing the house with her hands. My brother was nodding, already claiming his space. The system was active, the evidence log was open, and the storm was closing in. I left the study, closing the heavy door. The click of the latch was loud in the small hallway, a definitive sound that separated my preparation from their performance. I walked the 10 feet to the living room archway. The wall of noise hit me first, loud voices. Laughter that was too sharp, the clinking of glasses. It was a sound that did not belong here. A sound of entitlement, of conquerors celebrating a new acquisition. They were not visiting. They were performing their ownership. I stepped through the arch. My mother, Elaine, was the first to see me. She was standing by the fireplace, a flute of champagne in her hand. Her cheeks flushed. Her face lit up with a smile that was all teeth, a brilliant, practiced performance of warmth that I had seen her deploy on business clients and rivals her entire life. It was a predator's smile, disguised as a welcome. "Everly, there you are, sweetheart." She glided across the floor, her arms open for a hug I did not want. I remained still, my hands at my sides, forcing her to stop just short. Her arms dropping awkwardly, her perfume, an expensive heavy gardenia scent, cut through the cabin's cedar smell. It was an invasion of the air itself. "We were wondering where you were hiding," she said, her voice a low, disappointed coo, as if I were a child who had missed my cue. "We let ourselves in. I hope you do not mind." The door was, well, Derek handled it. She waved a dismissive hand, as if breaking and entering was a minor housekeeping chore she had delegated. "You're just in time to help with the appetizers," she added, turning toward the kitchen, as if I were the guest, as if she were the host. I looked past her. The room was chaotic. My brother, Derek, was in the loft, the one my grandmother had used for birdwatching, the quietest space in the house. He had a 25-foot yellow tape measure stretched across the floor. "See, Mom," he yelled down, his voice booming in the vaulted space. "It is even better than I thought. If I knock this half wall out, I can fit the easel and the drafting table. This studio is going to be perfect." He did not look at me. He did not acknowledge me. He was measuring my life for his convenience. In the corner, my cousin Marla, 24 and perpetually online, was holding her phone up, pivoting in a slow circle. Her screen was bright. I could hear her tinny, enthusiastic voice. "Hey guys. Hey, welcome to the official Gray Finch family cabin. We are live for New Year's Eve. Look at this place. It's so rustic. My grandma built this, and now it's ours. We are going to make so many memories here. Tag a friend who loves the cabin life." She panned the camera past me, her smile faltering for a fraction of a second before she dismissed me as part of the background, just another piece of rustic decor. Family cabin, the words hung in the air. A deliberate, public declaration, a lie, repeated often enough, becomes a narrative. She was manufacturing the narrative in real time. Aunt Paula, my mother's shadow and chief enabler, bustled over from the kitchen. She was wiping her hands on a dish towel I had hand-embroidered with chickadees 2 summers ago. "Elaine, I found it," Paula said, her voice triumphant. She was holding a single, folded sheet of paper. She unfolded it dramatically. It was a photocopy. The ink slightly smeared, the text blurry from being copied too many times. "I found the letter, the one from Mom. The one that says she promised this cabin would be shared. It was right in the key cabinet, just where you said it would be. She held it out, not to me, but to my mother, as if presenting a vital piece of evidence in a trial they were both winning. My mother simply nodded, a smug, satisfied look on her face. "The key cabinet?" I asked. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the noise. Derek paused his measuring. Marla stopped her narration. "The key cabinet has a combination lock. The combination was changed last month." Derek scoffed from the loft. He started winding his tape measure, the metallic zip echoing in the suddenly silent room. "Oh, that old thing, please. My locksmith buddy gave me the master instructions for that model years ago. It took me 30 seconds. He bounded down the stairs, landing heavily on the pine floor. He clapped his hands together, dusting them off, a cloud of plaster dust rising from his palms. He had already been disturbing the walls. "It's not breaking in when it's your own house, Ev," he said, walking past me to grab a beer from the cooler they had brought. "Relax. Have some champagne." He was so confident, so utterly, arrogantly sure of himself. He had just confessed, on audio and video, to bypassing a secure lock on a property he did not own. He thought he was boasting. He was, in fact, testifying. My mother glided over and placed her hand on my shoulder. Her nails, perfectly manicured and painted a deep, blood red, pressed lightly into my sweater. It was not a gesture of comfort. It was a gesture of restraint, of ownership. "Everly," she said, her voice dropping into that familiar sanctimonious tone, the one she used when she was about to deliver a lecture on morality. "We are a family, and families share. Your grandmother loved all of us. She would not want one person hoarding all this space." Her eyes scanned the room, the beautiful post and beam construction, the fieldstone fireplace, the bookshelves my grandmother had built with her own hands. Her gaze was not admiring. It was assessing, calculating. "It is selfish to keep a place like this empty when the whole family could be enjoying it. We are here to fix that. We are here to make it what it was always supposed to be ours." I held her gaze. I did not blink. I did not argue. I did not raise my voice. I simply smiled. A small, tight, cold smile that did not reach my eyes. "I see," I said. Then, I turned away from her. Breaking the physical contact, her hand dropped from my shoulder. I walked to the large framed photograph of a great horned owl that hung by the desk. I took my phone from my pocket. They watched me, confused. I aimed my camera at the bottom right corner of the frame. I had taped a small, discreet QR code there 2 weeks ago. My phone chimed softly as it recognized the code. A website loaded. I turned the phone and held it out for my mother to see. "What is this?" she asked, squinting, her false warmth replaced with irritation. "That," I said, "is the county assessor's public GIS map. The red lines are the official boundary markers, confirmed by GPS. The blue dot is us, and the text box shows the registered owner of Parcel 18B, the Finch Preserve Trust, not the Gonzalez Family Trust, not Elaine and Associates, the Finch Preserve Trust." Derek snorted, taking a long pull from his beer. "Nerd, who cares about maps? That's just paperwork. We are here. We are family. That beats your little website." "The law cares about maps," I said, putting my phone away, as if on cue. Derek's wife and Paula's son-in-law came in from the porch, shaking snow from their coats. They were carrying a long, rolled-up vinyl banner. "We got it, Derek," they announced. With a flourish, they unrolled it, in bright, tacky, suburban-style lettering. It read, "Welcome to the Gray Finch Family Resort." They produced zip ties and began fastening it to the loft railing, obscuring the view of the bookshelves, covering the spines of the books my grandmother and I had read together. Behind them, 3 children, my nieces and nephews, all under the age of 10, ran into the house, screaming with laughter, their snow boots melting on the hardwood floor. They were sweet kids, innocent in all this. They were also being used as human shields, deployed to make any confrontation on my part seem cruel and hysterical. No one could be mad when children were present. It was a classic, manipulative tactic. They were running around, happy and safe, completely unaware of the legal war zone they were playing in. My phone vibrated in my pocket. A real vibration, not a phantom one. I pulled it out. A new text. It was not from family. It was from Mr. Rourke, my neighbor from down the mountain. He was a retired park ranger, a man who noticed everything and said little. He was my only real ally up here. The text read, "Everly, just a heads up. Saw a Valley Furniture truck making the turn onto your access road this morning, around 10, before the storm got bad. Looked like they were having trouble on the grade. Hope you weren't expecting a delivery in this weather. Sheriff's closing the pass at 8. I read the text twice. My blood ran cold. This was not a visit. This was a planned occupation. They had pre-ordered furniture. Derek's studio was not a dream. It was an invoice. They had arranged delivery before they had even arrived, before the new year, before they even spoke to me. I looked up from my phone. My mother was gathering everyone by the fireplace, underneath the new, garish banner. "Everyone, everyone, let's get a picture before the kids get too messy," she commanded. A real New Year's photo, to show this is the start of a new tradition. Marla, ever the documentarian, set up her phone on the mantel, enabling the self-timer. Elaine bustled around, positioning people. She made sure to stand in the center, her hand possessively on the stone chimney. She pulled Derek and Paula close. "Everly, get in the picture," she called, her voice bright and brittle. "No, thank you," I said. "I'm fine here." She shrugged, her disappointment a performance for the others. "Suit yourself." It was not a photo. It was a statement. It was her own piece of evidence, time-stamped, showing them in actual and factual possession of the property. It was her staking a claim of adverse possession through social media. She was, in her own way, as methodical as I was. As the timer on Marla's phone beeped, and the flash went off, I spoke into the sudden quiet. "You should all know," I said, my voice level, "that everything is being recorded." Derek turned, his smile fading into a sneer. "What? Like your little bird-watching cams, who cares? Evgo, play with your spreadsheets. The adults are talking." He truly did not believe me. He could not conceive of a system more complex than his own desires. Not just the cameras, Derek, the audio, the microphone in the main smoke detector, the one right above your head, is quite sensitive. It's designed to pick up the sound of glass breaking or locks being forced. His face changed. For a second, the bravado cracked. He actually looked up. My mother shot me a look of pure venom. The mask of the loving matriarch gone, vaporized. Before she could speak, the lights in the cabin flickered. They did not go out, but they browned, dropping to a dull orange glow. The wind outside rose from a moan to a full-throated shriek, a physical weight pressing against the windows. The sound of a large branch cracking echoed through the woods. Marla picked up her phone, her thumb swiping frantically. "Ugh, what's wrong with the signal? I've only got 1 bar. I cannot even upload the photo. It just keeps spinning." She walked toward the window, holding her phone up to the glass as if in supplication. "It's gone. No signal at all. Nothing." The last tether to the outside world, the 4G cellular network, had just died. The storm had wrapped us in a cocoon of snow and silence. The road, as Mr. Rourke had warned, would be closed. There was no way in, and no way out. The Starlink I controlled, wired directly to my laptop and running on its own battery backup, was still active, but they did not know that. To them, we were isolated, trapped. They had it wrong. This cabin was not a cozy resort. It was not a fortress. It had just become a courtroom, and court was now in session. My family was loud. They were chaotic, emotionally driven, and lived in a world of assumptions, where feelings dictated reality. I was not. I am an operations director. I live in a world of systems, processes, and binding contracts, and my grandmother, God rest her soul, had built the perfect system. They saw a cabin. I saw Parcel 18B. The land itself was the first layer of defense. Gray Finch was a 30-acre plot, a square of old-growth forest surrounded on all three sides by Frostvale National Preserve. It was an island. The only way in or out was a single, unpaved, 3-mile logging easement that connected to Spencer Road. That road was public, but the easement had restrictions. It was a limited winter use right-of-way, meaning the county was not obligated to plow it, and the adjacent landowners, me, and only me, were not liable for any vehicle that got stuck. The blizzard, now howling like a living thing outside the windows, had just transformed that easement from an inconvenience into an impassable wall of ice and snow. The sheriff's shelter-in-place order was not a suggestion. It was a statement of fact. They were trapped. They thought this gave them leverage. They thought it forced me into a family negotiation. They were wrong. It had simply locked the doors to the courtroom. The second layer was the legal structure, the Finch Preserve Trust. My grandmother, a woman who had built a small fortune in quiet land deals, distrusted verbal promises. She distrusted my mother's emotional accounting. So, 5 years ago, she had hired the best estate lawyers in the state and created a fortress of paper. She had placed the cabin and its 30 acres into this trust. For the first 5 years, it was revocable. She could have changed it, but she had attached a set of conditions, a stewardship test. She had named me as the sole trustee and steward. My duties were simple, but absolute. 1, I had to pay all property taxes, in full and on time. 2, I had to maintain the physical structure, ensuring it never fell into disrepair. 3, I had to actively maintain the land as a designated bird habitat, in accordance with county wildlife guidelines. If I failed any one of these 3 conditions, the stewardship would pass to my mother, Elaine, my mother, who had not visited in a decade. My mother, who had once suggested they clear-cut the pines to open up the view. My grandmother knew exactly who she was, but the trust had a trigger, a deadline. This was its master stroke. The document stipulated that if the steward me successfully met all 3 conditions for 3 consecutive years, then the trust would automatically, irrevocably, convert. The power to change it would vanish. For me, for my mother, for anyone, forever. The property would be locked into the preserve, and I would be its sole, lifetime beneficiary and controlling steward. The date of this conversion, the moment the tumblers were set to fall into place, was January 1st. The time was 1 minute past midnight, 12:01 a.m. My family was operating on the flimsy, photocopied letter Aunt Paula had brandished, a blurry, non-specific note from 15 years ago, where my grandmother had allegedly promised the cabin would always be a place for the family. A promise, not a deed, not a filing. Not a contract. It was not registered with the county. It had no legal standing against a fully executed and filed trust document. It was, in legal terms, toilet paper. They were betting on a feeling. I was betting on the law, and I had my receipts. I had them in the Winterhold file, and I had digital copies in the cloud, accessible via my Starlink. I had the county tax receipts for the last 36 months, all stamped paid. I had the final, paid-in-full invoice from the roofing contractor, and most importantly, I had the bird log. It was a thick, bound ledger, 3 years of meticulous notes on feeder stocks, species counts, and habitat maintenance, and on the final page, a counter-signature from the county wildlife assessor, dated just 1 week ago, confirming the habitat was thriving and in full compliance. I had met the conditions. The clock was ticking down to my victory, but I had not just been defensive, I had been proactive. 2 weeks ago, I had driven up here and, in 3 feet of snow, I had personally posted the new boundary markers. They were not the old, friendly private property signs. They were 3 foot tall, reflective metal signs, printed in aggressive red. No trespassing, land held by Finch Preserve Trust. Violators will be prosecuted. I had planted them at the easement gate and at all 4 corners of the property line, and I had photographed each one. My phone's camera app opened to show the timestamp and the exact GPS coordinates. That file was already in my lawyer's inbox. The trust contained another, beautiful little clause, a non-waiver. It stated that any invitation to a non-beneficiary to stay on the property for more than 24 hours had to be in writing. Any guest status was contingent on a signed letter of consent from the steward. Without that letter, any person remaining on the property was, by definition, trespassing. They had been here for 3 hours. They had announced their intention to stay. They had not asked for, nor received, my consent. They were, all of them, actively trespassing. Then, there was the wall safe. It was hidden behind a heavy bookcase in the study, a bookcase I had not yet returned to. My mother knew about the safe. She assumed it held my grandmother's old jewelry, but it was not a normal safe. It was an escrow box, tied to a digital, time-delayed lock. The combination, set by my grandmother's lawyer, was 0101. It was literally impossible to open until January 1st. Inside was a single, wax-sealed envelope, the codicil, the final amendment to the will, which my lawyer suspected contained the final, explicit confirmation of the trust's terms, designed to be opened only after the trust had become irrevocable. It was my grandmother's final word, delivered from beyond the grave, precisely on schedule. They thought we were cut off from the world. My mother, Paula, and Derek were huddled by the fire, drinking my wine, mapping out their future. Marla was wandering the house, frowning at her dead phone. They did not see the thin gray cable running from the study window, up to the roof, where a small, flat-panel dish was aimed at the sky, its internal heaters melting the snow as fast as it landed. My Starlink. It was running on a dedicated, uninterruptible power supply, the same one that ran the hard drives and the camera system. I had a download speed of 200 megabits per second. I was connected to my lawyer, Harper Vale. I was connected to the county court system. We were, if necessary, prepared to file for an emergency remote injunction with the on-call judge, citing the blizzard as cause for the remote hearing. I had one more system running. My insurance policy, the policy, which I paid $1,200 a year for, was on my laptop. I had filed a pre-incident report 2 weeks ago, alerting them to a potential hostile possession attempt. The policy required immediate reporting of any change in effective control, my mother's appetizer orders, Derek's studio plans, the family resort banner. These were all documented proofs of their intent to seize control. The cameras were recording this. My insurance company was now my partner, legally bound to help me defend my title to the property or face a massive claim. My family thought this was a domestic dispute. I had already escalated it to a multi-front legal operation. The final piece was the theater. I walked to the fireplace mantel, past my mother, who was now complaining about the cheap brand of crackers I had bought. I picked up my grandmother's antique brass carriage clock. It was heavy and cold. It ticked with a loud, distinct thwack, thwack, thwack. I carried it to the center of the main coffee table. Right in the middle of their wine glasses and appetizer plates, I cleared a space. I set it down. The ticking sound filled the room. "What's that for, Ev?" Derek asked, annoyed at the interruption. "It's a clock," I said. I looked at my phone, checking the atomic time, and wound the key, adjusting it by 30 seconds. I looked up at them, my mother, my brother, my aunt, my cousin, all of them, poised to steal my home. "It's 5:03 p.m., I said, my voice calm and clear. "The sheriff has closed the road. You cannot leave. The trust, as my mother's photocopy conveniently omits, converts at 1 minute past midnight. That gives you 6 hours and 58 minutes. I did not have to explain what I meant. They knew. The air in the cabin changed. The cozy, boozy warmth vanished, replaced by something sharp, cold, and utterly clear. I had just set the countdown. The air in the room was thick with resentment. My mother, Elaine, was glaring at the ticking clock, the muscle in her jaw tight. Derek was pacing. slamming his beer bottle onto the coffee table, leaving wet rings on the wood. Paula was whispering furiously to Elaine. They were trapped, and they knew it. My countdown had turned their party into a deposition. I needed more than the overhead microphone, which could be muffled by the storm. I needed proximity. I went to the side table by the window, the one cluttered with my grandmother's old binoculars and birding guides. I pretended to look out at the snow, a solid, moving wall of white. My hand slipped into my pocket and retrieved the device. It was a digital audio recorder, no bigger than a car key fob. Its surface was matte black. I pressed the record button by feel. Knowing the indicator light was disabled, I slid it between a heavy copy of Sibley Birds of the East and a stack of old Audubon magazines. It was aimed directly at the coffee table where they sat. A secondary, isolated audio file. Redundancy is the heart of operations. I returned to the kitchen area, leaning against the counter, adopting an air of resignation. I poured myself a glass of the sparkling cider I kept for myself. Though it looked identical to their champagne, this was a marathon, not a sprint. I needed my wits. I needed to be the only sober person in the room. "You know," I said, my voice casual, "that clock is right. We are stuck here for at least another 6 hours. Maybe you should, I don't know, make your case." My mother's eyes snapped to mine. "Make our case. This is already decided. Everly. Is it?" I swirled the cider. "You have your photocopy. I have my trust document. It seems like a disagreement, but hypothetically, if you did fix this, as you said, if you did get the house, how would you share it? You all seem to have different plans." It was like throwing meat into a shark tank. Derek stopped pacing immediately. "That's easy," he said, pointing his beer bottle at the loft. "The loft is mine. It's the only space with the northern light I need for the studio. It's non-negotiable. It's my creative space. Permanently." "Permanently," I repeated softly. The recorder, 20 feet away, would catch it. The overhead mic would definitely catch it. Aunt Paula, always the pragmatist, scoffed. "Oh, stop it. Derek, a studio. You don't make any money from your art. This place is an asset. We have to be smart." She pulled a small notebook from her purse. She had already been taking notes. "There are 4 bedrooms. If we block off the loft, that's 5. We rent them, short term. A place like this in Frostvale. We could get $400 a night, easy. Maybe $500 in ski season. We split the profits. 4 ways. 4 ways, Derek snapped. "I'm the one who got us in." "And I'm the one who found the letter," Paula retorted. My mother held up her hand, the matriarch silencing her squabbling children. "Stop it, both of you. You sound so cheap." She stood by the fireplace, one hand on the stone mantel, positioning herself exactly as she had for the family photo. She was addressing the room, but it was a speech for a non-existent jury. "This isn't about rentals. This isn't about a studio," she said, her voice dripping with false nobility. "This is about legacy. Your grandmother built this cabin as a testament to the family. She intended it to be a gathering place, a place to build memories." She looked at me, her eyes filled with pitying condescension. "She left you in charge, Everly, because you were good with paperwork. She trusted you to execute her wishes, not to hoard the inheritance. You are the executor, sweetheart, not the owner. Your job is to facilitate the family's legacy, not to lock us out with your binders and your rules. You are failing her." It was a beautiful performance, a complete reframing of reality. She was attempting to gaslight me into believing my legal ownership was just a clerical role, and she had delivered this entire monologue directly toward the main smoke detector microphone. I made a point of picking up her wine glass from the table, refilling it, and handing it back to her. Her fingers wrapped around the stem, her thumb pressing firmly against the bowl, a perfect set of prints, on a specific glass, at a specific time. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I moved back toward the kitchen, turning my back to them, pretending to check on the appetizers I had no intention of making. It was a text from Harper Vale, my lawyer. The message was brief. Snow reports, confirm pass is closed. Sheriff just filed the emergency closure order. They are legally trapped. Good. Your only job now is to keep them in that house until after 0001. Do not let them leave, even if they want to. Do not engage in physical confrontation. Just keep them talking. The clock is your only ally. I typed a quick reply, my thumbs moving fast. They are currently on camera, dividing the property. Derek is claiming the loft permanently for a studio. Paula is drafting a business plan for short-term rentals. Elaine is claiming, I'm just the executor. They are openly admitting hostile possession on video. Harper's reply was almost instantaneous. Excellent. Let them dig. I'll have the emergency petition drafted and ready to file at 0002, citing their own admissions. I put the phone away and walked into the study, closing the door quietly. The wind was louder here, rattling the window frame. I looked under the desk. The small black box of the uninterruptible power supply UPS was glowing with a steady green light. The router, the security system's base station, and my laptop were all plugged into it. If the main power line went down, and in a storm this bad, it was a high probability this little box would give me at least 3 more hours of recording time and satellite internet. Enough time to get past the midnight deadline. The system was stable. I heard a crash from the hallway, followed by Derek's voice, raised in anger. Marla, what the hell are you doing? I opened the study door. Marla was standing in the narrow hallway that led to the utility closet and the small locked storeroom where I kept the expensive tools and snow-clearing equipment. Derek was standing in front of the storeroom door, which now had a visible dent near the handle. Marla had her phone out, recording him. I'm getting behind-the-scenes content, Marla insisted, her voice shaky but defiant. People love process videos. Get that thing out of my face, Derek yelled. He was holding a hammer and a crowbar from the utility closet. This lock is jammed, probably rusted shut. It's not jammed, Derek, I said from the study doorway. It's locked, because it's a private storeroom. I need the big snow shovel, Ev, he snapped, not looking at me. And probably the chainsaw. That branch that fell sounded big. We need to be able to clear the porch. He was manufacturing a crisis to justify a break-in. You don't need a chainsaw to clear the porch. Derek, he ignored me. He wedged the crowbar into the door frame. Marla, to my utter disbelief, kept filming, providing breathless commentary. Oh my God, guys, my cousin Derek is literally breaking down the door to the tool shed. It's so intense up here in the mountains. With a sound of splintering wood, the jamb cracked. The lock popped. The door flew open. Derek stumbled in. Victorious. Marla caught the entire thing on her phone. She thought she was filming a reality show. She had actually just filmed felony destruction of property. She had even helpfully narrated it. Marla, I said, that's excellent content. You should save that. You never know when you'll need it. She beamed, thinking I was complimenting her dedication. I turned away from the destruction of my property. I felt a cold, sharp spike of rage, but I pressed it down. It was not time for emotion. It was time for documentation. I walked back to the living room. Elaine and Paula had resumed their planning, their voices low. I went to the bookshelf, the one my grandmother had built. I knelt. On the bottom shelf, behind the heavy geography atlases, was her old wooden lap desk. It was made of dark mahogany, inlaid with a small brass finch. I pulled it out. My mother looked over, her eyes narrowing. What's in there? More of your grandmother's secrets. Just memories. I said. I opened the lid. It smelled like her, of old paper and peppermint. Inside were letters, photos, a pair of her old reading glasses. My family thought this was a box of sentiment. They were wrong. It was a box of compliance. I bypassed the letters. I bypassed the photos. My fingers found a folded, thick piece of paper at the bottom. I pulled it out. It was not a letter. It was the carbon copy of an invoice, the final, paid-in-full receipt for the new roof. $28,000. Dated this past August. My signature was at the bottom, alongside the contractor's. I held it for a moment. the physical proof of my stewardship, the literal cost of hoarding this space. This was one of the many documents my mother believed I, as executor, should have paid for out of my own pocket. While they debated paint colors, I did not show it to them. I did not need to. I simply folded it and slid it into my pocket. A tactile reminder of what was at stake. I glanced at the brass clock on the table. 9:15 p.m. The wind outside had become a solid wall of sound. The snow was no longer falling. It was moving sideways, a horizontal blur of white that erased the world. The windows were rattling in their frames, and the cabin, which had always felt so solid, groaned under the pressure. The children were asleep, piled under blankets in one of the back bedrooms, blissfully unaware. The adults, however, were on edge. The champagne was gone, and the alcohol was only making them more paranoid. They were talking in circles, their arguments looping back on themselves. Who deserved the master bedroom? Who would manage the rental bookings? They were trapped inside a snow globe of their own greed, and I was the only one who could see the hand on the outside, waiting to shake it. I sat in my grandmother's armchair, the roof receipt in my pocket, the sound of the ticking clock a steady, metallic heartbeat beneath the roar of the storm. Less than 3 hours to go. The hours after I set the clock on the table were the longest of my life. The air in the cabin was unbreathable, thick with alcohol fumes, resentment, and the damp smell of melting snow from their boots. Derek, my brother, had slumped into an armchair, glowering at the ticking clock as if he could intimidate it into stopping. My mother, Elaine, and Aunt Paula were at the kitchen table, their heads bent together, whispering in furious, sibilant tones. Their conspiracy now open, Marla, bored and cut off from her digital audience, was pacing the perimeter of the room, picking things up and putting them down, her energy a nervous rattle. I remained in my grandmother's armchair, nursing my glass of sparkling cider, my laptop open on the side table. Screen dimmed. I was not watching them. I was watching the system status. Battery backup 100%. Starlink connection stable. Internal hard drive recording. Cloud backup syncing. At 11:30 p.m., the lights, which had been steady, browned for a full 3 seconds. Derek looked up, a flicker of genuine fear in his eyes. "This place is a death trap," he muttered. "The power's going to fail." "The generator will kick in," my mother snapped, though her voice was tight. "The generator only runs the furnace and the fridge." "Elaine," I said, my voice quiet. Grandma didn't believe in wasting fuel on lights she could replace with a lantern. This, for the first time, seemed to land. The idea of being trapped in a freezing dark cabin with only me, the person they were actively trying to defraud, sent a new, delicious chill through the room. The clock on the mantel ticked. Thwack, thwack, thwack. At 11:59 p.m., I stood up. I walked to the kitchen counter, where my laptop was connected to the UPS. The tension followed me like a spotlight. "What now?" "Everly," my mother asked, her voice a low snarl. "Going to read us another rule." "Just checking the time," I said. I looked at the digital clock on my laptop. 11:59 and 30 seconds, as if on cue. The lights overhead did not just flicker, they guttered, pulsed a sick, weak orange, and died. The cabin plunged into absolute primal darkness. The only light was the weak green emergency bulb over the front door, and the vast, suffocating white of the blizzard, visible through the windows as a pale, churning void. Aunt Paula screamed, a short, sharp sound. Derek swore. I told you." "Mom." My mother said nothing, but I was calm. My laptop screen was still bright, a blue-white island in the black. On my screen, the system monitor showed the UPS had kicked in instantly. The router, the cameras, the hard drives, the satellite dish, all were running perfectly on dedicated battery power. My systems were holding, theirs were failing. The lights flickered back on after 10 agonizing seconds, but they were weak, running on the low-priority generator circuit. They were a dull, sickly yellow. It was 11:59 and 50 seconds. My mother, Elaine, rose to her feet. She was illuminated by the weak yellow light, her face a mask of shadows. The power outage had emboldened her. It was a sign of the house's weakness, its need for her. She raised her half-empty champagne flute. "The power is failing," she announced, her voice ringing out. "But we are not. This house needs us. It needs this family." She looked directly at me, her eyes glittering. "To the new year. To our house." Aunt Paula and Derek raised their glasses. "To our house," they echoed, on my laptop screen. I watched the feed from the doorbell camera. Its infrared lens cut through the dimness. It captured my mother's face in perfect, ghostly clarity as she made her declaration of war. The overhead microphone in the living room captured the audio. Crystal clear. Thwack, thwack, thwack. The clock on the mantel struck the hour. Midnight. A faint, muffled thump-thump vibrated through the walls. Distant fireworks from the town in the valley. A pathetic attempt at celebration. Swallowed by the roar of the storm. Derek, as if the sound were his starting pistol, grabbed the rolled-up schematic of his studio. He marched to the main wall, right over a framed photograph of my grandmother planting the pine tree that now towered over the cabin. With 4 rips of packing tape, he stuck his crude drawing to the wall. "Phase 1, he slurred, tapping the paper. "We start demolition tomorrow. This whole wall goes—" I was not looking at him. I was looking at the clock. The long second hand swept past the 12. It was now January 1st. I watched the clock for one full, agonizing minute. The room was silent, save for the wind, and then, at precisely 1 minute past midnight, a sound came from the study. It was not loud. It was not a bell or an alarm. It was a quiet, precise, mechanical noise. A small click, followed by a soft, motorized whir, and then a solid, definitive thunk. It was the sound of a bank vault opening. Everyone froze. "What in God's name was that?" Paula whispered, her eyes wide. Derek, suddenly sober, looked at the study door. "Is there someone else in the house?" "No. Derek," I said. I closed my laptop and picked it up. "That is the deadline." I walked past them. I walked into the study, leaving the door open. They followed, drawn by a gravity they could not understand, crowding the doorway to watch me. I went to the large, built-in oak bookshelf, the one that held my grandmother's entire collection of natural history guides. I put my hands on the frame and pulled. The entire unit swung outward smoothly on concealed hinges, revealing a 4-foot-tall, dark gray steel wall safe. A small LED light, which for 5 years had been dark, was now blinking a steady, bright green. Below the keypad, a thin, horizontal slot, previously invisible, had opened. And from it, a single, 9x12 envelope of heavy cream parchment had slid out, resting in a polished steel tray. It was sealed with a thick, unbroken disc of dark blue wax. My mother gasped. She pushed past Paula, her hand outstretched. "What is that? What did she hide?" "That," I said, "is the codicil." I took the envelope. It was heavy in my hand. The wax seal, I noted, was the one from her signet ring, the Finch. I turned and walked back into the living room. I placed my laptop on the heavy oak coffee table, right next to the ticking clock. I opened it. The quad-screen camera feed filled my screen. I angled the laptop so the built-in webcam was facing the fireplace, capturing the entire room. My family gathered around, watching me, their expressions a mixture of confusion and naked greed. They thought this was it, the treasure, the real will. I clicked the link Harper Vale had emailed me that morning. The screen went blank for a second, then resolved. Harper's face appeared, sharp and clear. She was in her home office, in a dark blazer, a wall of law books behind her. She looked as if she had been waiting all night. "Ms. Gonzalez?" she said, her voice crisp and clear, cutting through the cabin's strained atmosphere. "It is, by my clock, 12:02 a.m. on January 1st. Am I correct?" "You are Ms. Vale," I said. My mother stared at the screen. Who is this? What is this? Have you retrieved the escrow document from the time-locked safe? Harper asked, ignoring my mother. I have it here. I held the wax-sealed envelope up to the webcam. Please proceed. I picked up the small paper knife I had placed on the table hours ago. I slid the blade under the wax seal. It broke with a satisfying crack. I unfolded the heavy, stiff paper. I read the heading aloud. The New Year's codicil to the last will and testament of Eleanor Finch, executed and sealed. To be opened only upon or after 12:01 a.m., January 1st, by Everly Gonzalez. I scanned the dense legal text, my eyes finding the operative clause. I hereby affirm, I read, my voice steady, that upon the moment of conversion, stipulated in the trust, the Finch Preserve Trust, file number 33B8, becomes irrevocable, I confirm the sole beneficiary and steward of said trust, with all rights, titles, and privileges, is my granddaughter, Everly Gonzalez. I lowered the paper. Beneath the typed legal text, my grandmother had written a single sentence in her strong, familiar script. My voice thickened, but I did not stop. A house is not a gift to be divided. It is a charge to be kept. I looked up. The silence in the room was absolute. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Harper Vale cleared her throat. Thank you, Ms. Gonzalez. For the record, I am Harper Vale, counsel for the Finch estate. I am attesting that I have witnessed the unsealing of this codicil. Furthermore, at precisely 12:01 a.m., I filed a delayed activation petition with the Frost Vale County Court, file number 889C, confirming the irrevocable status of the trust. I attached Ms. Gonzalez's notarized proofs of stewardship, including all tax receipts and the certified bird log. The trust is, as of this moment, legally ironclad. The property is secured. My mother's face was chalk white. The blood had drained from it. You knew, she whispered, her voice a reedy, unfamiliar sound. You knew about this. You kept it from us. You deceived us. I folded the codicil slowly, precisely. I looked up and met her gaze. No, Mom, you deceived yourself. I just kept the receipts. I held up the paper. I kept this for her. I protected her. A catastrophic gust of wind hit the house, so violent it felt like a physical blow. The entire cabin shuddered, and the floor vibrated. A sound like a freight train roared past the roof. My phone, connected to the Starlink's Wi-Fi, lit up with a new text. The official county red alert. Catastrophic blizzard. All roads indefinitely closed. Do not attempt travel. All residents must shelter in place. This is a life-threatening event. We were locked in, completely. Harper Vale's face on the screen was stern. Given the circumstances, and the clear statements of intent to possess recorded over the last several hours, I am now required to make an official record. I am enabling cloud recording of this video conference, which is admissible in court. I need everyone in that room, for the record, to please state your full, legal name for the camera. My mother looked at the small green light of the webcam as if it were the eye of God. Derek looked like he was going to be physically ill. Marla had finally stopped filming. I turned the laptop around so it faced them directly. Harper, I said, you should know you are also being recorded on the cabin's internal high-definition system. I tapped the screen, bringing up the security feed. I angled the laptop so she could see the 4-quadrant split. I have the doorbell camera, which recorded my mother's toast to our house. I have the living room camera, which recorded my family's plans to divide the property. I have the loft camera, where Derek has already taped up his demolition plans, and I have the storeroom camera, which recorded Derek and Marla breaking the lock. I looked at my family, huddled together in the dim, yellow light, trapped by the snow, trapped by the law, trapped by their own recorded words. All angles, I said, all recorded. The silence in the cabin was heavy. broken only by the shriek of the wind and the steady, relentless thwack, thwack, thwack of the clock. My family, who had entered this house with the casual arrogance of conquerors, were now staring at a laptop screen as if it were a judge's bench. The camera's green light was an unblinking eye, a silent, damning witness. My mother, Elaine, recovered first. She was a fighter. I had to give her that. She would not be undone by a lawyer on a screen. Her panic coalesced into righteous indignation. "This is absurd," she snapped, her voice shaking but regaining its familiar, domineering edge. A video call. A codicil, Eleanor would never do this. She turned, rummaging in her expensive handbag, and pulled out her own weapon, the blurry, dog-eared photocopy that Paula had found. "This," she said, slapping it onto the coffee table, "is what matters. This is her promise, a promise that this house would be for all of us." Harper Vale leaned closer to her camera. "Ma'am, I am counsel for the estate. I recognize that document. It has been circulated before. I am Harper Vale, and I need you to hold that paper up to Ms. Gonzalez's webcam. Please, specifically, the bottom right corner." My mother hesitated. Trapped. Refusing would look like guilt. She picked it up, her hand trembling slightly, and held it to the laptop's camera. "Like this is ridiculous. A little higher. Now, zoom in, Everly," Harper commanded. I used the trackpad, pinching to zoom on the video feed of my own webcam, blowing up the image of the paper. "Thank you," Harper said. "As you can see, the seal in that corner is a basic notary stamp, available at any office supply store. Now, Everly, please open file 44C from the Winterhold drive." I minimized the video call and opened the file. On my screen, a high-resolution scan of the actual Frostvale County registration seal appeared. It was intricate, featuring the county pinecone and the state motto. "Please put them side by side," Harper said. I did. The difference was laughable. One was a child's toy. The other was the official mark of the state. "That photocopy," Harper said, her voice flat, "is a fabrication. The watermark does not match the county of record. It is legally meaningless." Elaine snatched the paper back. "It's a copy. The seal is just faint." "It's not faint, ma'am," Harper said. "It's the wrong seal." Derek, seeing his mother falter, jumped in. He was the man of action. "This is all crap," he yelled, and the camera microphones peaked. "Paperwork, seals, who cares? I've put money into this place. Real money." He dug into his wallet and pulled out a folded receipt. "I paid for the chimney sweeping, last fall. $300. That's maintenance. That's an investment. That makes me an interested party." He threw the paper at me. I did not even need to look at Harper. I knew the protocol. I smoothed the paper. It was from Frostvale Chimney Masonry. An estimate. "Derek," I said, my voice cold. "This is an invoice for $350, and at the bottom, in red, it says, 'Balance due.' It's a quote, not a receipt. It was never paid." I turned the invoice toward the webcam. Harper nodded. "Thank you. Derek, you've just provided evidence that you were aware of required maintenance and actively neglected to pay for it. Duly noted." Derek's face went a shade of purple. I had only seen when his high school football team lost the playoffs. Aunt Paula, desperate, tried a different tactic, the modern digital defense. "Feelings matter," she insisted, pulling out her smartphone. "Eleanor loved us all. She texted me. She started scrolling frantically through years of messages. Here, look." She shoved the phone at my face. It was a text message thread. "Paula, this is from 3 years ago," I said. "Yes," she said. "The cabin is always open for all of you." Paula read it with a triumphant flourish. Harper's voice cut in again. "Paula, correct. Could you please read the date on that message? For the record?" Paula's eyes scanned the screen. Her confidence wavered. "It's July 10th, 2021. "Thank you," Harper said. "For the record, the Finch Preserve Trust. with its strict non-waiver clause regarding written permission, was filed with the county on April 5, 2022. That text message, even if authentic, was sent nearly a year before the new legal structure was created. It is null, void, and entirely superseded by the trust document you were mailed a copy of. Paula's face crumpled. She had been clinging to an old, expired sentiment. But the story... Marla suddenly yelped, staring at her phone in horror. The blizzard must have lulled. Just for a moment, and her phone, desperately seeking a signal, had found one. The video. The one of the locket. It uploaded. It's got 3,000 views. Oh God, Derek, people are calling it breaking and entering in the comments. Harper, on the screen, smiled. It was the first time. It was terrifying. Marla, correct, thank you. I've already screenshotted the video and downloaded a mirror copy. Your narration. My cousin Derek is literally breaking down the door, is considered a spontaneous utterance and a confession. It will be attached as Exhibit D. Marla looked up, her face pale. I was just making content. You were? Harper agreed. And thank you for your service. The counterattack had failed. Their evidence was a fraudulent seal, an unpaid bill, and an expired text. Now, it was my turn. Harper, I said. They've questioned my stewardship. So I heard, she said. I walked back to the study, the family parting from me like I was a surgeon. I returned with the Winterhold file. I did not open the tax receipts. I did not open the roofing invoice. I opened the bird log. I placed the thick leather-bound ledger on the table. This, I said, is the stewardship log, as required by the trust, 36 consecutive months of observations. I opened it to the first page. January, 3 years ago, 2 pairs of downy woodpeckers, feeder levels checked. I turned the pages. May, bluebird box number 3, 5 eggs, confirmed. I kept turning, page after page of my own handwriting. Through 3 full years of seasons, I turned to the final, most recent page. December 28th, 1 week ago, habitat assessment completed with County Assessor R. Miles, all feeder stations active, winter shelter boxes intact. I pointed to the bottom of the page. And here? Confirmed in compliance with Finch Preserve Trust, Section 4B, signed, R. Miles, Frostvale County Wildlife Service. I held the signature up to the webcam. This, I said to my mother, is the real seal. This is the real promise I kept. As if summoned by the legal victory, my laptop chimed with an incoming call. It was not Harper. It was a new video link. I clicked accept. A second face appeared next to Harper's. It was Mr. Rourke, my neighbor, looking grainy but determined, sitting in his own dark living room, a flannel jacket on. Mr. Rourke, you're on a recorded line with counsel, I said immediately. Good, he growled. His voice was like gravel. Harper, you there? I'm testifying. I told that woman, Elaine, on the phone 2 days ago, 2 days that she had no right to order furniture to this address. I told her the trust was explicit. She told me, and I quote, that possession is 9/10 of the law, and that she'd have the locks changed by New Year's Day. I also have the security footage from my gate camera of the Valley furniture truck attempting to make the turn onto the easement at 10:04 this morning. My mother, Elaine, looked like she had been struck. She had been so arrogant, so sure. She had broadcast her entire plan to the one man who was watching. Thank you, Mr. Rourke, Harper said. That confirms premeditation. I'll need that footage. That's it, Harper said, her tone shifting to finality. We have them on trespass, breaking and entering, attempted fraud, and conspiracy. I've already pinged the court clerk. Given the red alert blizzard, we are first on the emergency weather docket for a remote hearing tomorrow morning, 7:45 a.m. Judge Hollis, Everly, I will email you the link. To the rest of you, she said, her eyes boring into my mother. I strongly advise you to find counsel. You will be served digitally. My mother finally broke. The cold, calculating corporate raider dissolved, replaced by the desperate, failing woman underneath. No, she cried out. Stop this. This is family. You don't take family to court. You don't do this. Everly, we are your blood. Family comes before law. It was the plea she had used my entire life, the ultimate trump card that had excused every trespass, every slight, every betrayal. Harper Vale, on the screen, did not blink. Ms. Gonzalez, she said to my mother, you have it backwards. The law comes first, precisely so a family cannot destroy itself with this kind of behavior. The law is what saves families from people like you. Harper disconnected. Mr. Rourke disconnected. The screen went back to my desktop. The cabin was plunged back into its terrible, intimate silence. Only the wind and the clock. I stood up. I went to the kitchen and filled the kettle. My hands perfectly steady. I spooned tea leaves into a pot. I was not shaking. I was calm. The system had worked. As the kettle whistled, I poured the hot water. In the steam rising from the cup, I saw my grandmother's face. I saw us, 10 years ago, in a different, milder snowstorm. Her showing me how to fill the bird log. You don't fight them with their weapons, Evie. She had told me, her hand over mine. You fight them with your own. Be the paper. Be the proof. I drank the tea. It was hot, and it centered me. The blizzard raged, sealing the doors, sealing the windows. This cabin, my sanctuary, was now a holding cell. We were all prisoners, locked in with the evidence. My laptop chimed. A new email. It was not from Harper. It was a forward. My fingers clicked the trackpad. It was a copy of an invoice from Frostvale Lock Key. It was a service request. Date of service January 1st. Time 9 a.m. The service requested full property rekey, all exterior and interior locks, 6 copies. The order, placed 1 week ago, was not in my mother's name. It was in Derek's, the final piece of proof. He had not just boasted about a locksmith friend. He had hired one. I saved the file. Exhibit E. The night did not end. It was a suffocating, endless stretch of darkness, punctuated by the roar of the blizzard and the heavy, resentful breathing of my family. No one slept. I sat in the armchair, the laptop on my knees, the Winterhold file heavy on the floor by my feet. The weak generator light cast a jaundiced, sickly glow over the room. My family was scattered on the sofas, a defeated army, wrapped in my grandmother's quilts. They were not just trapped by the snow, they were trapped by the law, and the realization was a cold, bitter sickness in the air. At 6 a.m., I made coffee. The smell cut through the stale air. I poured a cup for myself. I did not offer them any. They were, in the eyes of the law, trespassers. And I was not their host. The light that finally came was not sunlight. It was a pale, silver-gray luminescence. The world outside erased by a wall of swirling white. The snow was piled halfway up the living room windows. The wind was a constant, high-pitched scream. At 7:30 a.m., I sat at the heavy oak table. I opened my laptop. The Starlink dish, buried but heated, was holding the connection. The UPS unit was beeping, its battery finally exhausted, but the generator was now powering the system. I sipped my coffee. My mother, Elaine, watched me, her eyes red-rimmed and hollow. "You are a cold, cold woman, Everly," she whispered, her voice rough. "Your grandmother would be ashamed of you." "My grandmother," I said, not looking up, "would be proud." At 7:44 a.m., I clicked the Zoom link Harper had sent. A window opened, displaying the seal of the Frostvale County Court. My family, drawn by the sound, gathered behind me, a miserable, silent choir. A face appeared, a court clerk. "This is the emergency docket for Judge Hollis. Are you Ms. Everly Gonzalez?" "I am," I said, "and his counsel, Ms. Harper Vale, present." Harper's face appeared in a new window. Present, Your Honor. And the defendants. Elaine, Derek, and Paula Gonzalez, and Marla Croft. My family stared dumbly at the screen. They are present, I said. They are standing behind me. They are unrepresented. Finally, the judge's window activated. Judge Hollis appeared. He was not in robes. He was in a small, wood-paneled room, clearly his home study. He wore a thick, knitted wool scarf. He looked tired and profoundly annoyed. "Thank you for your promptness. All," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Clerk, confirm the status of the emergency." "Yes, Your Honor. The county is under a red alert. The Spencer Pass is closed indefinitely due to zero visibility and 20-foot drifts. All roads are impassable. We are officially on weather lockdown." "Very well," Hollis said. "Given the exigent circumstances, I am authorizing this remote hearing. Ms. Vale, the floor is yours. Make it fast. I have 3 other weather-related injunctions this morning." Harper was all business. "Thank you, Your Honor. This is an emergency petition for a temporary restraining order to affirm ownership and prevent further damage to property. The facts are simple." She spoke for 5 minutes, her voice a precise, legal instrument. She laid out the architecture of my grandmother's plan, the creation of the Finch Preserve Trust, the 3-year stewardship conditions, the automatic, irrevocable conversion, the trigger, set for 12:01 a.m. on January 1st, the existence of the New Year's codicil, confirming the beneficiary. "Your Honor," she concluded, "the trust converted, as designed, 7 hours and 46 minutes ago. The property, Parcel 18B, legally and irrevocably belongs to my client, Ms. Everly Gonzalez. The defendants are currently trespassing, have caused material damage to the property, and have, on video, stated their clear intent to seize control." The judge looked at me. "Ms. Gonzalez, Ms. Vale mentions proof. Do you have it?" This was my cue. I held up the Winterhold file. "I do, Your Honor." I did not need to fumble. I had the stack ready. "I have here the paid-in-full county tax receipts for the last 3 years." I held them to the camera. "I have the finalized, paid invoices for all capital improvements, including the new roof, satisfying the maintenance clause." I held them up. "And I have the stewardship log." I placed the heavy bird log on the table. 36 consecutive months of habitat maintenance, countersigned and certified by the county wildlife assessor, R. Miles, confirming full compliance. Judge Hollis leaned into his camera. He was interested in the log. "That is a very thorough ledger, Ms. Gonzalez. My grandmother taught me how to keep it, Your Honor." "I see." He turned his gaze to the silent figures behind me. "Ms. Elaine Gonzalez, this is a very strong case. Do you have any evidence to counter this claim?" My mother, who had spent a lifetime navigating boardrooms, found her footing. This was her stage. She pushed me aside, her face filling the camera. "Your Honor, this is a terrible misunderstanding, a family dispute. My daughter," she said the word like a curse, "is twisting my mother's words." She held up the blurry photocopy. "My mother promised this cabin to all of us. This is her letter. This proves her intent. Everly is just the executor. She's trying to steal the legacy from the entire family." Harper unmuted herself. "Permission to share my screen, Your Honor." "Granted." Hollis grunted. Harper's screen filled the display. It was a split-screen image. On the left was a high-resolution scan of the official Frostvale County seal. On the right was a zoomed-in image of the seal on my mother's photocopy. "As you can see, Your Honor, the seal on the defendant's promise letter is a fraudulent notary stamp. It does not match the county of record. It is, in fact, not a legal seal at all." "It's a copy," my mother shrieked. "It's a bad copy." "It gets worse, Your Honor," Harper said, changing the slide. "We retained a forensic document examiner who analyzed the text and signature of that specific photocopy. His report, which I have filed with this petition, concludes with 99% certainty that the document is a patch job. The signature of Eleanor Finch was digitally lifted from a separate document, likely a birthday card, and affixed to this typed, fraudulent promise. The letter is a complete fabrication. The blood drained from my mother's face. She stumbled back from the table, colliding with Paula. Judge Hollis looked at Derek. Mr. Derek Gonzalez, my clerk's notes mention a video of you, narrated by a Ms. Marla Croft, forcing entry into a locked storeroom. Derek, who was hungover and pale, blustered. I needed a shovel. The porch was covered in snow. This is my family's cabin. I have a right. You have a right to break down a locked door, sir, Hollis asked, his voice dangerously quiet. My buddy is a locksmith. You are evading the question, Hollis snapped. Silence. I have the video file attached to the petition. I will review it. Finally, Your Honor, Harper said. We have the testimony of the neighbor, Mr. Rourke. His sworn affidavit confirms he warned Elaine Gonzalez against her planned occupation. It also confirms she stated her intent to change the locks by New Year's Day. His gate camera, Your Honor, also captured a furniture delivery truck hired by the defendants attempting to access the property yesterday morning. This was a premeditated, coordinated, and hostile seizure. There was a long, terrible silence. The only sound was the howling of the blizzard, a low-fidelity shriek behind the judge's voice. Judge Hollis sighed. He rubbed the bridge of his nose. Then he looked at me, and his expression was not that of a judge, but of a man. Ms. Gonzalez, one final question. The red alert is not hyperbole. This storm is, by all accounts, catastrophic. What is the current status of the defendants? My mother, Derek, and Paula all leaned in, their eyes wide. They were waiting. This was the moment I could be cruel. This was the moment I could throw them out. Legally, I kept my voice flat, cold, and professional. They are safe, Your Honor. The cabin's emergency generator is running. They have access to food, water, and heat. The 3 children are unharmed and currently asleep in a warm bedroom. I am providing shelter. No one is being denied basic human necessities. Judge Hollis nodded slowly, a deep, thoughtful motion. This court notes the plaintiff's goodwill in providing shelter during this crisis. This fact is entered into the record. He looked back at his notes. His face hardened. However, he said, the court also notes the overwhelming, meticulously documented validity of the plaintiff's claim, and the profoundly fraudulent nature of the defendant's counterclaim. He picked up a piece of paper. Therefore, this court is issuing an immediate temporary restraining order. Elaine Gonzalez, Derek Gonzalez, and Paula Gonzalez are hereby enjoined and restrained from any attempt to occupy, alter, damage, or claim title to Parcel 18B, the Gray Finch cabin. Your legal status, as of this moment, is that of guests, permitted to shelter by the plaintiff's mercy and the storm's necessity. You will not touch, move, or alter one more thing in that home. Any violation of this order will result in your immediate arrest for contempt of court as soon as the sheriff's department can reach you. He looked at me. Ms. Gonzalez, your claim is strong. The paperwork is impeccable. This temporary order will hold until a full hearing, but I suggest the defendants review their options. They are on very, very thin ice. He slammed a book shut. Not a gavel. This hearing is adjourned. Clerk, call the next case. The screen went blank. The cabin was silent. The wind, which had been a backdrop, was now the only sound. It was the voice of a vast, white emptiness. I closed the laptop. I stood up and walked to the kitchen to pour myself another cup of coffee. I looked out the window at the snow, a solid, unmoving mass. My mother did not move. She did not yell. She did not cry. She simply walked, like a woman in a trance, to the window. She placed her hand on the frosted glass. She stared out at the wall of white that had, hours ago, been her fortress. Now, it was her prison. For the first time in my entire life, Elaine Gonzalez had nothing to say. The cabin was a tomb of white silence. The emergency hearing, a sterile, brutal procedure beamed in from a world that no longer felt real, was over. The judge was gone. Harper was gone. All that remained was the evidence. The laptop screen was dark. The clock on the table ticked, a small mechanical sound against the massive, violent roar of the wind outside. My family, who had entered this house as a conquering army, were now refugees, prisoners of the storm and the law. Derek had collapsed onto the sofa, his head in his hands, his studio schematic on the wall opposite him a testament to his profound, childish delusion. Paula was weeping. Thick, silent tears of betrayal. Not for me, but for her own wasted efforts. Marla sat on the floor, back against the wall, her dead phone in her lap, staring into the middle distance. My mother, Elaine, had not moved. She was still at the window, her back to me, a rigid, unbending silhouette against the churning white. She was, for the first time in her life, defeated. The law had beaten her, but my grandmother had not just built a legal fortress. She had kept a journal. She had kept everything. The codicil, which I had read, was the legal execution. It was the hammer. But it was not the reason. I looked at the coffee table, the codicil, the paper that had sealed their fate, lay next to my teacup, but I was not finished. The time-locked safe had presented the codicil on its automated tray, but the 0101 code had also unlocked the main door. I stood up. The movement was loud in the quiet room. All their heads, except my mother's, turned to watch me. I walked back to the study, my boots heavy on the pine floor. I swung the heavy bookcase open. The gray steel safe was there, the door slightly ajar from when I had pulled the codicil tray. I put my hand on the cold steel handle and pulled the main door open. Inside, it was dark. There was no jewelry. There were no stacks of cash. There was only one item, a second envelope, thick as the first, made of the same heavy cream parchment, but this one was not sealed with the red finch signet. It was sealed with a disc of hard, dark blue wax, a color I had never seen her use. It was addressed, in her familiar, strong script, to me. Everly, I took it. It was heavy. I returned to the living room. The clock ticked. Thwack, thwack, thwack. I placed the blue-sealed envelope on the table. My mother finally turned from the window, her eyes, red and swollen, fixed on the envelope. More, she whispered, her voice a dry rasp. What more? What else did she do to us? I don't know, I said. This one is addressed to me. I slid the paper knife under the blue wax. It cracked, the sound sharp as breaking ice. I pulled out the contents. It was not a single, typed legal page. It was a letter. 4 pages, handwritten, on her personal stationery, and tucked behind it, a thin blue carbon document, a bank receipt. I looked at the date on the letter. October, 10 years ago. I looked at the salutation. It was not addressed to me. My dearest Elaine, I read aloud. My mother flinched, as if I had struck her. I am writing this, I read, my voice clear and steady, so that there is no confusion, now or ever. We spoke yesterday. You told me you needed capital for your new city apartment. You said, and I quote, "This dusty old cabin is too far from anything to be a real asset. You told me you wanted your inheritance now, in cash, not later, in trees and birdseed." I looked up. My mother was shaking her head, a small, frantic motion. No, that's not how it was. Derek lifted his head. What is she reading? I continued, my voice gaining strength. I have agreed to your request. I am wiring you the $200,000 you asked for. It is the full assessed value of your share of my estate. Had it been divided, you are choosing to take your inheritance in cash. You are choosing the city. I paused. I reached into the envelope and pulled out the blue carbon slip. This, I said, holding it up, is a copy of a cashier's check, deposited 10 years ago. From the account of Eleanor Finch, To the account of Elaine Gonzalez, for $200,000. A strangled sound came from Derek. He shot to his feet. 200,000, he roared, his voice cracking. What, Mom? What is this? My mother was paper white. It was a gift. Derek, a down payment. She wanted to help me. It was temporary. She said the letter was just a formality. Did she? I asked. I looked back at the page in my hand. Let's see. By accepting this wire transfer, a record of which I am attaching, you, Elaine, formally and permanently waive all future claims on the Frostvale property. You will have no right to it, no claim to it, and no say in its future. You cannot have it both ways. You cannot have the cash and the cabin. I held the letter out. It's a buyout, Mom, a waiver. You sold your legacy for an apartment. You sold this cabin 10 years ago, and you knew it. The silence that followed was the sound of a family breaking apart. Derek turned, his face a mask of purple rage. Not at me, but at his own mother. You lied to us, he whispered, his voice thick with disbelief. You told me it was ours. You told me to fight for it. You knew you had no right. You knew and you let me. You let me break down that door. He pointed at the splintered jamb of the storeroom. You brought me up here on a lie. Aunt Paula just stared at Elaine, her mouth open. You had $200,000, Elaine, she whispered. You told me you were mortgaged to the hilt. You told me we were partners in this, that we would split the profit. Shut up, Paula, my mother shrieked, her voice finally breaking. You don't know anything. I know, Derek yelled. That you fabricated that other letter, the one Paula found, the promise. That was your fake, wasn't it? To cover this. It wasn't fake, she cried, but the lie was hollow, dead in the air. Marla, who had watched this all with a kind of numb horror, picked up her dead phone. She looked at her mother, Paula. She looked at her aunt, Elaine. She looked at Derek, and then she stood up, walked to the kitchen counter, and put the phone in the sink, as far away from herself as she could get. The documentarian had finally seen enough. I let their acidic rage fill the room. This was their fight, their web of deceit. My heart was pounding, a deep, heavy ache of sorrow. This was the real poison. This was what my grandmother had fought to contain. I looked down at the letter. There was one last page. I am leaving the cabin in trust, I read, my voice cutting through their argument, silencing them. It is not for Derek, who sees land only for what it can be. His studio. It is not for Paula, who sees it only for what it can earn. Her rentals. And it is not for you, Elaine, who sees it only as a chip to be cashed in. My hand was shaking. I put it on the table to steady it. I am leaving it, I read. For the child who actually sees it, the one who sat with me and learned the birds, the one who helped me stain the deck, the one who understands the logbook. This cabin is for the child who knows how to care for it. The room was utterly still. Even the wind seemed to have paused. If Everly chooses to preserve it, let her. If she chooses to keep it, let her. But you, Elaine, will leave her alone. You have had your share. Your greed has a limit, and I am drawing the line. I took a ragged breath. I read the last two sentences. Her penmanship was darker here. The ink pressed deep into the paper. Let this be my final word on the matter. Everly is quiet, but quiet does not mean weak. I folded the letter. I placed it, the blue waiver, and the codicil in a neat pile on the table. My laptop, which had been dark, chimed. The screen lit up. I had not closed the Zoom call. Harper was still there, and so was Judge Hollis. His camera was still on. He had not left. He had sat in his home office with his wool scarf on, and he had listened to every single word. My blood ran cold. I unmuted the microphone. Harper, I whispered. Her face was grim. I'm here, Everly. The judge is still present. We heard all of it. We heard Ms. Elaine Gonzalez state that her mother told her the waiver was just a formality, a clear verbal admission that she knew the document existed and chose to ignore it. Judge Hollis leaned forward. His face was unreadable. "Ms. Vale," he said, his voice a low rumble. "We have the TRO. The trust is, as you said, ironclad. This is a family tragedy. But is it legally relevant at this stage?" "Yes, Your Honor," I said. Finding my voice, I surprised myself. "It is because this is the why. It is the root of the fraud. It's not just a letter. It's a signed waiver. With proof of payment. It establishes unequivocal intent. It proves my mother's entire claim was made in bad faith. With full knowledge of her own prior agreement, it is the foundation of their conspiracy." I looked at Harper. "I want it in the record." Harper nodded. "Understanding. I will file it as Exhibit F proof of prior waiver and estoppel. It extinguishes any possible future claim or challenge to the trust's validity." Judge Hollis looked at the screen, at my face. He looked past me, at the wrecked, defeated people standing in the room behind me. "Ms. Gonzalez," he said, his voice softer, "your grandmother was a very, very smart woman, and very thorough." He nodded. "Once. Scan the documents. Send them to Ms. Vale. She will file them with my clerk." He looked at my mother, a look of profound judicial disappointment. "The record," he said, "speaks for itself. This court is adjourned." The screen went black. The laptop screen was dark. Judge Hollis was gone. Harper was gone. The Zoom call that had functioned as a remote courtroom was over. The silence that fell was not the tense, waiting silence of the night before. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a grave. All the lies, the bluster, the greed, and the manufactured indignation had been stripped away by the blue-sealed letter. All that was left was the raw, ugly truth of my mother's decade-old betrayal. Derek was the one breathing. His breaths were ragged, torn from his chest. He was staring at his mother, Elaine, with an expression of such pure, unadulterated hatred that I almost felt sorry for her. Paula was weeping into her hands, the quiet, repetitive sobs of someone who has just seen a winning lottery ticket dissolve in their hands. Marla was frozen, her back against the wall, a refugee from her own family. My mother, for her part, was hollow. The fight had drained out of her, leaving nothing. She had lost, not just the cabin. She had lost the $200,000 she had tried to double-dip. She had lost her son. She had lost her sister. She had lost every shred of her authority. She was the first to speak, but her voice was not for me. It was for the dark laptop screen. "Harper," she whispered, as if the lawyer were still there. "Ms. Vale." I unmuted the connection. Harper's face, stern and patient, reappeared. She had been waiting. "Ms. Gonzalez." It's a ruin," my mother whispered. "But it doesn't have to be. We are still family. Everly, Evie, please, just tell her. We can share. We can—" She was bargaining, but her voice had no currency. "Just the holidays, Christmas, New Year's. We can sign something, a shared ownership, just for the major holidays. That's fair." Harper did not even look at me. She answered directly. "No, that is not an option. As stipulated in the Finch Preserve Trust, which Judge Hollis just affirmed, there is a strict non-waiver and indivisibility clause. Any shared ownership, even for one day, would violate the terms of the irrevocable trust. It is not a timeshare. The integrity of the preserve is absolute. It legally cannot be done." Derek, vibrating with a rage that had nowhere to go, turned on the laptop. "This is theft," he yelled, spittle flying from his lips. "You're stealing my future, my art. That studio was my entire career. I demand compensation for the loss of my workspace, for the emotional damage." Harper raised a single, perfectly sculpted eyebrow. Mr. Gonzalez, that is a fascinating claim. I have just one question for the record. In the 36 months that my client, Ms. Gonzalez, has been solely responsible for paying the property taxes, the $1,200 a year insurance premiums, the $28,000 roof, and all other maintenance, did you, even once, contribute a single dollar to the tax fund? Derek's mouth opened, a wet gulping sound. He had nothing. I am looking at the Winterhold file receipts right now. Mr. Gonzalez. Harper continued, her voice like ice. The name Derek Gonzalez appears nowhere. You cannot claim compensation for a lost studio in a property you have actively neglected while simultaneously planning its illegal demolition. Your claim is dismissed as frivolous. Do not mention it again. Paula, seeing her own angles collapsing, tried one last time. She was the pragmatist. Wait, Miss Vale, Everly, be reasonable. The trust? It's a preserve, yes, but it still costs money, taxes, upkeep. You can't just let it sit here. She leaned forward, her voice a conspiratorial hiss. What if we lease it? Just 8 weeks a year, peak ski season. I can manage the bookings. I'm very organized. It would pay the taxes 10 times over. We can split that. That's a fair business arrangement. This time, I was the one who answered. No, Paula. All their heads turned to me. I had been the silent witness, the collector of evidence. Now I was the owner. No, I repeated. You're right. It's a preserve. The Finch Preserve. It's a designated bird habitat, as specified in the trust. That is its purpose. That is the stewardship duty I've been fulfilling. I placed my hand on the heavy-bound bird log that still sat on the table. A high-traffic, short-term rental business, with strangers and parties every weekend, is fundamentally incompatible with the core mission of the trust. It's not allowed. The habitat, Paula, takes precedence over profit. Grandma was very clear on that. The answer is no. They were done. They had no legal claim, no financial claim, and no moral claim. They were, in the cold, clear light of morning, simply trespassers, caught, convicted, and trapped by a blizzard. Harper, seeing the negotiation was over, moved to the endgame. Your Honor, she said, Judge Hollis's camera, which I thought was off, flickered back to life. He had been listening, muted, the entire time. He had not left his post. I am here, Ms. Vale. Your Honor, Harper said. The defendants are trapped by the storm, and my client has offered, and is currently providing, humanitarian shelter. However, we cannot remain in this contested state indefinitely. I propose a solution to end this conflict, protect my client's rights, and satisfy the court. I have drafted a waiver and agreement to vacate. She shared her screen. A simple, one-page document appeared. The text was large and unambiguous. It's very simple, Harper explained, her voice aimed at my family. One, the defendants, Elaine, Derek, and Paula, fully and finally acknowledge the absolute validity of the Finch Preserve Trust and the sole stewardship of Everly Gonzalez. 2. They waive all past, present, and future claims against the property, the trust, and the estate. 3. In exchange for this, Ms. Gonzalez agrees to provide them humanitarian shelter for a period not to exceed 48 hours, or until the sheriff deems Mott Spencer Road passable, whichever is sooner. 4. At that time, they will vacate the premises immediately, taking all their personal belongings, and will be forbidden from returning, ever, without the express, written, notarized consent of my client. She paused. If you refuse to sign, you will be in active violation of Judge Hollis's temporary restraining order. My client will be forced to have you removed by the Sheriff's Department as soon as the pass is open, and we will pursue you for the full cost of this hearing and all damages to the property. The choice was simple. Sign the waiver and leave with the small dignity of a guest, or refuse and be ejected as criminals. My mother, Elaine, stared at the document on the screen. This was the final, legal nail, the admission of her defeat, the end of a decades-long campaign of entitlement. She looked past the laptop, past me, to the window. The snow was finally, blessedly, slowing down. The violent, horizontal blur had softened into individual, heavy flakes. She was looking at the cabin, really looking at it, not as an asset, not as a prize, not as her legacy. She was seeing it as what it was: my grandmother's house. And now, mine. She looked at the stone fireplace, the heavy, hand-hewn beams. I saw the calculation finally drain from her eyes, replaced by a profound, empty sadness. She realized it didn't belong to her, not just legally. It no longer belonged to her emotionally. She had sold that right 10 years ago for a down payment. My gaze shifted. I looked at Marla. She was still in the corner, her face pale and stained with tears. She had been a tool in this, the digital historian of her mother's and aunt's greed. "Marla," I said. My voice was softer than I intended. She flinched, as if expecting to be hit. "This waiver doesn't apply to you," I said. "You're not named as a defendant." I helped," she whispered. "I filmed Derek. I posted it." "Yes, you did," I said. "And you filmed my mother toasting our house. You filmed everything. You were the best, most impartial witness I had. You provided Exhibit D." I paused, letting that sink in. "If you want to, after this, you can come back, on your own. You can stay for a weekend, but you're not a guest. You're an assistant." I tapped the thick bird log on the table. "You can learn to do this. You can learn to observe the finches, and fill the feeders, and make notes. You can learn to care for the place, like I did. You can make that your content." Marla looked at her smartphone, which she had retrieved and was clutching in her lap. Then she looked at the bird log. She nodded. Once, a small, jerky, convulsive movement. She didn't speak, but she deliberately, slowly, turned her phone over and placed it screen down on the floor. She was exchanging her digital life for a physical one. Derek, who had been watching this interaction, let out a long, ragged, whistling breath. It was the sound of a lung collapsing. He stood up. He walked over to the garish "Welcome to the Gray Finch Family Resort" banner. He tore it from the railing, the zip ties snapping. Then he went to his studio schematic, still taped to the wall. He looked at it for a long, hard moment, his entire, imagined, stolen future. He ripped the paper from the wall, the tape pulling off long strips of old varnish with a sound like a scream. He crumpled it into a tight, angry ball. He walked to the fireplace, where the generator was powering a small, electric log set, and he threw the paper ball in. He didn't just destroy the map, he destroyed the fantasy. He sat back down, a man with no inheritance and no studio. "Ms. Gonzalez," Harper said, pulling my attention back. "I am emailing you the document. Do you have a printer?" "I do," I said. I walked to the study, my family parting for me. I returned with my small, portable laser printer. I plugged it into the generator's power strip. The machine whirred to life, a sudden, bureaucratic sound in the grieving room. "Print 3 copies," Harper commanded. "One for you, one for them, one for the court file. We need this witnessed." The printer hummed, spitting out the 3 pages of their surrender. "Judge Hollis," Harper said, "we are ready for the signatures." The judge's camera came on again. He had put on his glasses. He looked like a man who had seen too much, too early in the morning. "Proceed." I placed the 3 copies on the coffee table. I uncapped my grandmother's heavy fountain pen, the one she had used to sign the trust. "Elaine," she walked forward, her movement stiff, like an automaton. She picked up the pen. She looked at the line. She signed her name. "Derek." He came forward. He grabbed the pen and signed, his signature an angry, jagged slash. "Paula," she signed, her hand shaking, weeping small drops of black ink onto the page. I signed my name last, on all 3 copies. I held each one up to the webcam, showing the 3 signatures under my own. Signatures obtained, Your Honor, all 3 copies. Thank you, Ms. Gonzalez, Judge Hollis said, his voice gravelly with fatigue. This agreement is so ordered by the court. Entered into the record under seal. We are done here. Good. Good morning. His screen went black. Harper gave me a single, sharp nod. I'll see you at the final confirmation hearing this afternoon. Call me when you're safely off the mountain. She, too, disconnected. The laptop screen went dark. The room was finally completely silent. The only sounds left were the ones that belonged here. The howl of the wind in the chimney, now dying to a whisper. The steady, heavy drip, drip, drip of the snow melting on the satellite dish. And from just outside the window, the sharp, rhythmic tap, tap, tap of a woodpecker. High up in the great pine, looking for its breakfast. I looked at the brass carriage clock. 10:05 a.m. The storm was breaking. A report I'd seen on the county sheriff's feed said the plows were aiming to have the pass open, 1 lane only, by noon, 2 hours. In 2 hours, the road would be open, and in the afternoon, I would drive down the mountain to the courthouse in town, not for a hearing, but for a final, in-person confirmation. A formality. The war was over. I had held the line. The 2 hours after I printed the waiver were the quietest of the entire ordeal. The blizzard had broken. The wind, which had been a screaming solid entity, had exhausted itself and was now just a low, intermittent sigh in the pines. The only sounds were the heavy, wet plops of snow falling from the overloaded branches, a constant, irregular drumming on the roof. The plows, as promised, had cleared a single, treacherous lane down Mott Spencer Road. My family moved like ghosts, packing their suitcases with the clothes they had arrived in, their family resort dreams now just damp, wrinkled fabric. They did not speak to me. They did not speak to each other. Derek, his face a mask of sallow, angry defeat, threw his bag onto the porch without a word. Paula avoided my gaze, her eyes red and puffy. My mother, Elaine, was the last to leave. She stood at the door, her hand on the knob, her back to me. She was wearing her expensive city coat, but it looked wrong here, too thin for the massive, white world outside. You had everything. Everly, she said, her voice a dry rasp. You had this. You didn't need to burn it all down. You could have been kind. I was, I said, my voice flat. I gave you shelter. I gave you tea. I gave you the truth. I held up my copy of the waiver they had signed. You were the one who brought the gasoline, Mom. I just held up the match you handed me. She said nothing. She walked out, her boots crunching in the new, heavy snow, and did not look back. I watched from the window as their 3 cars, which had been buried in drifts, fishtailed, and slid down the easement, a miserable, retreating convoy. I closed the door. The click of the deadbolt was the loudest sound I had ever heard. I was alone. In my house, I made a pot of coffee, scanned the signed waivers, and emailed them, along with the blue-sealed letter, to Harper. Then I put on my own snow gear and spent an hour clearing the porch, not with a chainsaw, but with my grandmother's sturdy, wide-mouthed shovel. At 3 o'clock that afternoon, I was in town. The Frostvale County Courthouse was not a grand white, columned building. It was a low brick and wood structure from the 1970s, smelling of wet wool carpets and old files. The snow was melting off the zinc roof, dripping onto the concrete walkway in a steady, rhythmic fall. It was the sound of a clock, released from a frozen spring, finally returning to its normal, steady beat. I was not in my snow gear. I was in my work clothes, the ones I had driven up in, black wool trousers, a silk blouse, a sharp, structured blazer. I was Everly Gonzalez, operations director. I was not Evie, the cabin girl. I was both, and they were here, together. Harper met me in the hall. She was in a crisp, dark gray suit. She looked as fresh as if she had slept a full 8 hours. Everly, she said, giving me a firm, brief nod. You look well? You too. Harper. The judge is ready. This is a formality, but a necessary one. A final in-person confirmation to close the loop on the emergency hearing. They are here. I know, I said. My family was already in the courtroom, huddled on a bench in the back. They looked terrible. They were still in the clothes they had worn all night, rumpled and stained with melted snow. Derek's shoes had left a trail of mud on the clean linoleum floor. They looked like what they were, defendants. They had found a lawyer, a harried-looking man from a local firm, who was glancing at his watch and shuffling papers with the air of someone who had been paid a frantic, last-minute retainer and already regretted it. All rise, the bailiff said. We stood. Judge Hollis entered, this time in his full black robes. He looked imposing, his tiredness replaced by the full, sober authority of the bench. He sat, looked at the file, and then looked out at the room. He did not waste time. This is case 889C, in the matter of the Finch Preserve Trust. This session is to confirm and finalize the rulings made during the emergency remote hearing of 0745 this morning, January 1st. I have reviewed the filed, signed waivers, as well as Exhibit F, the waiver of claim signed 10 years ago by Ms. Elaine Gonzalez, and the accompanying proof of payment. We are here to enter the final, binding judgment. The new lawyer, their lawyer, stood up, his voice weak. Your Honor, my clients feel this was a misunderstanding, a domestic dispute that has escalated. They were acting on what they believed was familial consensus. Judge Hollis held up a hand. The lawyer stopped, his mouth open. Counselor, the judge said, his voice a low, judicial rumble. I sat on a satellite link from my own home in the middle of a catastrophic blizzard, and I listened to your clients admit, on a recorded line, to conspiracy to commit fraud. I saw a video of one of your clients breaking down a door. I heard another admit, in her own words, that she had knowledge of a prior waiver she had signed for $200,000, and that she was still attempting to claim the property. This is not a misunderstanding. It is a textbook case of bad faith. The lawyer sat down. He did not speak again. Judge Hollis put on his glasses. He began to read from the order. 1. This court fully affirms the validity of the Finch Preserve Trust, file number 33B8, and the New Year's codicil. The court confirms the conversion to an irrevocable trust at 12:01 a.m. January 1st is complete and binding. 2. This court confirms the sole, legal, and lifetime beneficiary and steward of said trust is the plaintiff, Ms. Everly Gonzalez. Her title is clear and absolute. 3. The counterclaim, filed in spirit if not in form, by Elaine Gonzalez, Derek Gonzalez, and Paula Gonzalez, is hereby and permanently dismissed with prejudice. He looked up at them, over his glasses, to make sure they understood the words. Dismissed with prejudice, he repeated, means you can never bring this claim, or any version of it, against this property or this plaintiff, in any court, ever again. It is finished. My mother's hand, which was resting on her purse, tightened. I could see, even from where I sat, the outline of the fraudulent photocopy, still in her bag, a useless, toxic talisman. 4, the judge continued. This court issues a permanent restraining order against Elaine Gonzalez, Derek Gonzalez, and Paula Gonzalez. They are enjoined from harassing the plaintiff and are permanently barred from the property at Parcel 18B, unless, as the waiver stipulates, they receive explicit, written, and notarized consent. He then looked at where Marla would have been sitting, but she was not there. She had, wisely, driven straight home. Furthermore, as agreed in the waiver, any and all false, misleading, or defamatory digital content including, but not limited to, social media videos and posts claiming family ownership must be removed and permanently deleted within the next 24 hours, or the creator will be held in contempt of court. 5. The court formally notes the commendable actions of the plaintiff, Ms. Everly Gonzalez, In the face of a hostile and premeditated occupation of her home, she maintained her composure, upheld the law, and provided humanitarian shelter to the defendants and their children during a life-threatening storm. She protected both the property and the people, and the court thanks her for her good sense. A flush of warmth, the first I had felt in days, spread through my chest. Harper stood. "Your Honor, I have one final motion. I am filing for the full reimbursement of plaintiff's legal fees and all associated costs, to be paid by the defendants, given the fraudulent and frivolous nature of their claim." She placed a single, heavily itemized bill on the clerk's desk. Judge Hollis looked at it. He looked at my mother's new, shell-shocked lawyer. "Does your client object?" "Counselor." The lawyer, who knew a losing battle when he saw one, just shook his head. "No, Your Honor." So ordered. The defendants, Elaine, Derek, and Paula Gonzalez, will be jointly and severally liable for the plaintiff's legal fees, payment to be made in full within 60 days. It was the final, devastating blow. The $200,000 my mother had stolen, the money Derek and Paula had tried to get. Now they would have to pay, out of their own pockets, for their failed coup. "Is there any further business?" the judge asked. "Yes, Your Honor," I said. I stood. My family looked at me, a flicker of fear in their eyes, as if I were about to demand jail time. I did not look at them. I walked to the clerk's desk, holding the Winterhold file. I did not give her the tax receipts, or the codicil, or the blue-sealed letter. Those were for my records. I opened the file and took out the bird log, the thick, heavy, leather-bound ledger. "Your Honor," I said, "I wish to formally submit the Finch Preserve stewardship log into the court's permanent record." I placed it on the desk. Not as evidence, but as a promise. I looked at Judge Hollis. My grandmother's will was not just about ownership. It was about a charge to be kept. This ledger is my commitment to this court, and to her memory, that I will continue to uphold that charge. The Finch Preserve will be a preserve. That is my word. Judge Hollis looked at the book. He looked at me. He nodded, slowly. "The court accepts the log, and it accepts your word, Ms. Gonzalez." He turned to my family. Elaine was staring at her hands. Derek was staring at the floor, his muddy shoes a mark of shame on the polished wood. The judge picked up his gavel. "This court," he said, his voice resonating in the quiet room, "has affirmed a truth that should be self-evident. Ownership is not a vague concept. It is not a feeling. It is not an assumption based on family. Ownership is a fact. It is recorded, it is filed, and it is kept." He brought the gavel down. The crack of the wood was final. "This court is adjourned." I did not stay. I did not watch them leave. Harper gave me a nod, and I nodded back. I turned and walked out of the courtroom. Alone. I walked out into the cold, clear, 3 o'clock afternoon. The air was clean. The snow was melting. The drip, drip, drip from the roof, a steady, normal, peaceful sound. I walked to my car. Before I got in, I took my small digital audio recorder from my pocket, the one that had captured all their plans. I pressed record. I held it up to the clean, cold air. "This is Everly Gonzalez," I said, "for my own record. The hearing is over. The case is closed." I paused, looking up at the mountains, the snow-covered pines a brilliant white against a deep blue sky. My mother was wrong. A home isn't a place people come to measure rooms for a studio. It's a place where you keep your word. I stopped the recording. I got in my car, and I placed the recorder in the Winterhold file. I closed the accordion latch. The click was sharp, definitive. The knot was untied. The system was closed. The evidence had won. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are listening from. So please drop a comment below and let's share our thoughts. Remember to subscribe to Maya Revenge Stories, like this video, and give it an extra boost by hitting the hype button so more people can hear this story.